Hello and welcome back to my blog. We're on to part 6, The Creative Process in the Individual by T. Troward. Chapter 3, part 1, The Divine Ideal. What is the divine ideal? At first it might appear hopeless to attempt to answer such a question, but by adhering to a definite principle, we shall find that it will open out and lead us on and show us things which we could not otherwise have seen. This is the nature of principle, and is what distinguishes it from mere rules which are only the application of principle under some particular set of conditions. We found two principles as essential in our conception of the originating spirit, namely its power of selection and its power of initiative. And we found a third principle as its only possible motive, namely the desire of the living for ever-increasing enjoyment of life. Now, with these three principles as the very essence of the all-originating spirit to guide us, we shall, I think, be able to form some conception of that divine ideal which gives rise to the fifth stage of manifestation of spirit, upon which we should now be preparing to enter. We have seen that the spirit's enjoyment of life is necessarily a-reciprocal. It must have a corresponding fact in manifestation to answer to it. Otherwise, by the inherent law of mind, no consciousness, and consequently no enjoyment, could accrue, and therefore by the law of continuous progression, the required reciprocal should manifest as a being awakening to the consciousness of the principle by which he himself comes into existence. Such an awakening cannot proceed from a comparison of one set of existing conditions with another, but only from the recognition of a power which is independent of all conditions, that is to say, the absolute self-dependence of the spirit. A being thus awakened would be the proper correspondence of the spirit's enjoyment of life, at a stage not only above mechanical motion or physical vitality, but even above intellectual perception of existing phenomena. That is to say, at the stage where the spirit's enjoyment consists in recognizing itself as the source of all things. The position in the absolute would be, so to speak, the awakening of spirit to the recognition of its own artistic ability. I use the word artistic as more nearly expressing an almost unstatable recognition, or almost unstatable idea than any other I can think of, for the work of the artist approaches more closely to creation ex nihilo than any other form of human activity. The work of the artist is the expression of the self that the artist is, while that of the scientist is the comparison of facts which exist independently of his own personality. It is true that the realm of art is not without its methods of analysis, but the analysis is that of the artist's own feelings and of the causes which give rise to it. These are found to contain in themselves certain principles which are fundamental to all art. But these principles are the laws of the creative action of mind rather than those of the limitations of matter. Now, if we may transfer this familiar analogy to our conception of the working of the all-originating mind, we may picture it as the great artist giving visible expression to his feeling by a process which, though subject to no restriction from antecedent conditions, yet works by a law which is inseparable from the feeling itself. In fact, the law is the feeling, and the feeling is the law of perfect creativeness. Some such self-contemplation as this is the only way in which we can conceive the next, or fifth, stage of spirit's self-recognition as taking place. Having got as far as it has in the four previous stages, that is, to the production of intellectual man as its correspondence, the next step in advance must be on the lines I have indicated, unless, indeed, there were a sudden and arbitrary breaking of the law of continuity, a supposition which the whole creative process up to now forbids us to entertain. Therefore, we may picture the fifth stage of the self-contemplation of spirit as its awakening to the recognition of its own artistic ability, its own absolute freedom of action and creative power. Just as in studio parlance, we say that an artist becomes free of his palette, but by the always present law of reciprocity, through which alone self-consciousness can be attained, this self-recognition of spirit in the absolute implies a corresponding objective fact in the world of the relative, that is to say, the coming into manifestation of a being capable of realizing the free creative artistry of the spirit and of recognizing the same principle in himself, while at the same time realizing also the relation between the universal manifesting principle and its individual manifestation. Such, it appears to me, must be the conception of the divine ideal embodied in the fifth stage of the progress of manifestation. But I would draw particular attention to the concluding words of the last paragraph, for if we miss the relation between the universal manifesting principle and its individual manifestation, we have failed to realize the principle altogether, whether in the universal or in the individual. It is just their interaction that makes each become what it does become, and in this further becoming consists the progression. This relation proceeds from the principle I pointed out in the opening chapter, which makes it necessary for the universal spirit to be always harmonious with itself. And if this unity is not recognized by the individual, he cannot hold that position of reciprocity to the originating spirit, which will enable it to recognize itself as in the enjoyment of life at the higher level we are now contemplating. Rather, the feeling conveyed would be that of something antagonistic, producing the reverse of enjoyment, thus philosophically bringing out the point of the scriptural injunction, grieve not the spirit. Also, the reaction upon the individual must necessarily give rise to a corresponding state of inharmony, though he may not be able to define his feeling of unrest or to account for it. But on the other hand, if the grand harmony of the originating spirit within itself is duly regarded, then the individual mind affords a fresh center from which the spirit contemplates itself in what I have ventured to call its artistic originality, a boundless potential of creativeness, yet always regulated by its own inherent law of unity. And this law of the spirit's original unity is a very simple one. It is the spirit's necessary and basic conception of itself. A lie is a statement that something is which is not. Then, since the spirit's statement or conception of anything necessarily makes that thing exist, it is logically impossible for it to conceive a lie. Therefore, the spirit is truth. Similarly, disease and death are the negative of life, and therefore the spirit, as the principle of life, cannot embody disease or death in its self-contemplation. In like manner also, since it is free to produce what it will, the spirit cannot desire the presence of repugnant forms, and so one of its inherent laws must be beauty. In this threefold law of truth, life, and beauty, we find the whole underlying nature of the spirit, and no action on the part of the individual can be at variance with the originating unity, which does not controvert these fundamental principles. That's the end of that part of Chapter 3, The Divine Ideal. More tomorrow. Make it a great day, and bye for now.